Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of the Future Classroom Lab for 2023, titled Driving Climate Action in Your Schools with Green IT. My name is Konstantinos Andronikidis. I work for European Schoolnet, and I have the pleasure to be your host today. Before starting introducing our speakers, and for those that do not know us, European Schoolnet is a network of 34 ministries of education, and our goal is to support education stakeholders in Europe and beyond in the transformation processes around education. The Future Classroom Lab is an initiative of European Schoolnet and an inspirational learning environment in Brussels, challenging visitors to rethink the role of pedagogy, technology, and design in their classrooms. Today's webinar is organized in collaboration with Acer, a global supplier of educational technology equipment. Acer is also one of the Future Classroom Lab industry partners, and we are very happy to be joined today by experts on the topic of sustainability with a focus on education in schools. The speakers will address how IT can help tackle climate change, the adoption and acceleration of responsible IT consumption and production in the education sector, and the latest innovations in green IT product design and programs for schools. Our speakers today are Roberto Rosaschino, Senior welcome, Roberto.
Good
Senior
afternoon,
Education and
Konstantinos.
Sustainability. Good afternoon. So Roberto is Senior Education and Sustainability Manager at Acer, and Ewan Anderson, CIO and co-founder of Pixar 3. And I have him here. Welcome, Ewan, as well.
Welcome. Thank you.
After the presentation, we will have some time to address any comments or questions you might have. So feel free to share your thoughts, comments, and questions in the Q&A section of the platform. Without any further delay, I also give now the floor to Roberto for a first introduction, and then to Ewan, who will talk about framing sustainability, barriers and challenges, and climate change initiatives for schools. So Roberto, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Konstantino. Again, good afternoon to everyone. Konstantino mentioned before that European Schoolnet is supporting schools and ministry in the digital transformation, where as part of the transformation that schools are facing nowadays, we have noticed that sustainability is becoming a relevant pillar. I've been following education for many years and sustainability in particular for more than 1 year. And indeed, what we have observed talking with different stakeholders within the education space is that the requirements on sustainability is becoming more and more relevant. The European Union is, of course, asking to the different government at local and regional level to consider sustainability as an asset, whatever they are introducing or planning some new projects. And we have personal experience in countries, just to name few, like Spain, France, Italy, or the UK, that the requirements on this aspect is becoming more and more relevant. So we've decided that this was the right time to talk about driving climate action and how the green IT can actually support schools in their digital and green transformation. And in order to properly tackle this topic that could be very difficult because it's very wide, so it's important to drive also the messages and the focus where you as a school should focus on. I'm pleased to have PX3 here in the webinar. We've already started our collaboration. It's a very well-known and renewable company on this aspect. So with no further delay, I hand over to Ewan to give you a very useful and important information on what does it mean sustainability, why is important, and which are the first steps to take on. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Roberto. So to quickly introduce PX3, the company was set up by myself and my co-founder, we'll talk about in a second, just over 5 years ago. And our aim really is to provide objective, independent sustainability analysis to allow organizations to make better informed decisions around their IT strategy and IT procurement. So what I want to do today really is talk about some of the background to those decisions, some of the information you can use to help you make better sustainability decisions around your IT infrastructure, and yeah, that high level sort of course of action to take away. And then I'll hand back to Roberto from Acer to talk a bit about what goes into greener, more sustainable products. So a word, first of all, about the speaker who was supposed to be presenting today and who put the slide deck together. Justin Parker is the co-founder of PX3, and he's also a research scientist, and there's a few of the companies there that he's done research for. And as you can see, there's a lot of technology companies there, but also some significant government organizations and business organizations as well. So it's fair to say that we do a lot of research for these organizations. And while they get to sponsor the question, we conduct all our research according to strict scientific methodologies. So while they can ask the question, they don't get to determine what the result of our findings is. So that's always done to empirical research science standards. Unfortunately, Justin has contracted COVID-19 and is unable to present at the moment due to very, very frequent coughing. So he asked me to step in at the last minute and deliver his slides. But as I say, we're both available for contact if people do want to follow up on this, and we're happy to engage on any topics of interest. So what I'm going to cover today is really the background to sustainable information technology, why this has not been more generally adopted by organizations, and how to overcome the barriers that we perceive, and a call to action, some specific free tools that are available to help you plan and navigate your journey. So firstly, what do we mean by sustainability? And this is closely linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So it's really the principle of ensuring that what we do today doesn't limit the future for future generations, whether that's economic, social, or environmental damage. So it's really looking to minimize the impact that we have on the environment for future generations. And that, from an IT perspective, is very important because, if we look at the fact that there are over 4.5 billion users of end user computing, so we're talking about laptops and desktops, not mobile phones. There's far more than that use mobile phones. But if we think about people using laptops and desktops in particular for work and for education and social use, there's 4.6 billion of those. And manufacturers are currently building new devices at a rate of about 460 million per annum. So that's really important. And if we look at their use of energy, they're the second biggest consumer of commercial energy after lighting and heating. So it's really important that we start to look at how these impact on the environment as we look to keep global warming to the 1.5 degrees that have been set out in the Paris Agreement and similar. So how does this manifest itself from an IT perspective? Well, IT, that's across end user computing and data centers, is responsible for around 2.3% of global greenhouse gas emissions. If you then add in commuting to and from work, then the impact of that together is over 5%. And if we were to look at planting a forest to remove those emissions from the atmosphere, well, first of all, it would need to be a mature forest rather than one we just planted. But even at a mature forest rate, it would need to be the size of Canada and Greenland combined to remove those emissions from the atmosphere. So quite simply, we haven't got enough space on the planet to plant our way out of the problem. We need to look at solutions that reduce both the energy that devices consume, but also reduce the frequency with which new devices are made. And we'll look at that in a second, because it's important that we cover both ends of the spectrum, that we use devices for longer, but when we do change a device, we change it for one that uses less energy and had less energy and materials used in making it. So to briefly touch on greenhouse gas emissions and scopes, there are three scopes of emissions that we think about when we're talking to customers about how they reduce their carbon footprint and aim to become net zero as part of their medium-term strategies. So scope one is direct emissions. So that's emissions from consuming energy directly within a building. So that would be something like burning natural gas to power heating, or consuming fuel and turning it into miles within company vehicles. So it's that direct consumption of fuel within an owned or leased device. Scope 2 is the one that's most focused on over the last few years, which is indirect consumption through energy produced by somebody else. So typically emissions relating to electricity use. So somebody else is burning and combusting fuel or collecting it through sustainable means to create electricity. That process creates emissions. When you consume the electricity from the grid, then you're consuming it at a local rate, normally calculated by country. We then come to scope 3 emissions, which is in effect everything else. And that includes employee commuting, business travel, but also the manufacturing of the goods that we use, their transport to the point where we use them, and their disposal at end of life. So all of that comes together in scope 3, but only some of it really are things that you can directly control. So part of what we do, and we'll talk about this towards the end, is around making that information around embodied emissions through manufacturing and transport very open and transparent, so that you can make decisions between different manufacturers and different models about which have genuinely got the lowest carbon footprint. To give you an idea of what that can mean, what we're looking at here is a graphic showing the difference between a very high carbon footprint laptop and a very low carbon footprint laptop. So on the red side of the spectrum, if you like, you can see that over 4 years, this particular laptop, that's one of the worst that we've seen, is responsible for nearly 550 kilograms of CO2 emissions, which is the equivalent of, or would require 6.2 trees per annum to remove that in terms of emissions from the atmosphere. And if we compare that with an example here, a very low footprint device that's available from Acer, the 311 device, that's only 197 kilograms and only requires 2.2 trees to remove the emissions from the atmosphere. And this is an implication not just for the environment, it also has economic consequences as well, because over that 4 years, that device will consume nearly 200 kilowatts of energy, with a typical buy price of over 55 euros. Now, the equivalent laptop from Acer, the low energy model, that's only consuming 45 kilowatt hours over that same period, with a cost of 12.6 euros. So again, there's a worked example at the bottom there to show you what that means for 1,000 devices across an educational establishment, creating 351,000 kilograms over that period, or 351,000 less kilograms over that period, and requiring 4,000 fewer trees to remove that emissions to the environment, which is the equivalent in pollution terms of driving a car to the moon nearly 5.5 times. And also, as I said, significant euro costs, over 40,000 euros saved over that same period of time. So that's from a laptop perspective. From a desktop perspective, if we replaced a desktop with a monitor with an Acer device, again, we're seeing even larger savings because the combined monitor and desktop are consuming significantly more energy. So 773 kilograms of CO2e being produced versus 197. And again, from an energy consumption, 302 kilowatt hours down to that 45, again, with even greater savings in terms of costs and trees. So there really are compelling reasons to look at those lower footprint, lower energy consumption devices over that period. The other thing to consider is that, you know, a lot of organizations are driven by a 3 or 4 year device refresh cycle. And you know, that is quite typical, particularly in education. But the lower footprint devices, particularly ones which use Linux-based operating systems, don't need to be refreshed as often. So they potentially, in effect, go wrong less. So their device life cycles can be extended out to 6 years from typically 4 or 5. But that not only means that we are manufacturing less devices because they're being replaced less often, but also it removes some of the procurement cycles needed to purchase new devices. So in effect, over time, it skips entire device refresh cycles, which again, as a consequential saving in the example here of, you know, from a financial perspective, in the region of 280,000 euros from avoiding that procurement cycle, but also over that 1,000 device example, saving nearly 400,000 kilograms of CO2e over that period. So, you know, it's always worth thinking about this from both an economic and an ecological perspective. We all have those decisions to make in our lives. But one of the really good things to point out here is that the green IT does not have to be a more expensive solution for organizations to consider. It offers significant savings in terms of reduced energy costs and reduced procurement costs as well, which is important. So given the compelling nature of saving costs and carbon, why are green and sustainability initiatives not adopted more widely? So typically we see this as an inertia within the organization that's driven by 4 key factors. First of all, people are very busy, particularly in education, doing the job that they need to do, which is deliver education to their citizens, to their students. And having the time to step back and plan this strategically is an issue. There is also, as I mentioned, the perception that sustainable IT is going to require budget. So hopefully we've shown that that isn't necessarily the case. There's then a concern that sustainability will have no discernible impact on the issues that face us. But in actual fact, as we've seen, we can make significant savings if we combine that lower energy with longer device use. And finally, not really understanding where you are today and what you can do about it is one of the biggest challenges, because, you know, it's fine to say I want to be green, but if you don't know what your footprint is today and you don't know how to make greener choices for the future, it's very hard to make those decisions. And very often the advice on what to do is hard to come by. It's hard to ensure that it's genuinely independent. And it's also potentially something that people pay consultancy or other fees for to get that information. So I'll give you some tips on where you can go for information to make that slightly simpler without having to spend money on it. So from an organizational perspective, what we do from a company perspective, we help to baseline and track carbon footprint reduction. We help establish strategies for organizations to deliver savings, help them with sustainable procurement, and help them to measure their ongoing success. So a lot of that is for very large organizations, for central government departments, for multinational organizations. But we recognize that there's also a requirement for smaller organizations with smaller budgets who simply can't access that level of consultancy. So we have launched an EUC end user computing carbon footprint calculator. There's a link there, and you'll also receive a link at the end. So this allows you to go in and profile the devices that you have in your organization and get that scope 2 and scope 3 carbon footprint calculation. So you can say what you use, how long you use it for, and where in the world you operate, and it will provide you with that calculation and allow you to download a PDF report. The main thing to say about this is it's free, it's entirely independent, and there's no restrictions on using it. There's no advertising, and there's no follow-up sales calls. It is genuinely a completely free to use tool that allows you to avoid some of those lengthy, complex, and sometimes costly calculations. So that takes care of the baseline for you from a school's perspective. The other side of it is trying to determine what the greenest option for you to purchase for your next device refresh when you need one is. And again, while it's not free to everybody, we have developed a tool which is free for schools to use, and that's our dynamic carbon footprint tool. And again, this allows you to go in and say what sort of device you're looking for, how many years you want to use it, where in the world you are, and which device vendors you might consider. And what it provides is an objective view on the data published by the manufacturers, brought to a level playing field and tailored for the way that you work in terms of those device cycles. So it will give you a comparison of up to 6 devices that match your specification and allow you to download and print off those scope 2 and scope 3 and combined carbon footprint reports so that you can take those to suppliers, you can use them as part of your purchasing and procurement strategies, and just ensure that you're taking carbon footprint, total carbon footprint, into consideration when you're making purchasing decisions. So just to draw on an example of a customer that we've worked with who really benefited from this, and this is a joint customer of PX3 and Acer, and they've saved nearly 40% of their energy consumption from device use by moving to lower energy devices. They saved 34% in terms of their emissions, their commuting emissions by 40%, and saved in terms of UK pounds, which is not far off euros at the moment, nearly $250,000 in terms of annual utility and procurement costs. And there's a video available from them talking about their sustainability journey and the partnerships that have taken them to this point. So it's a good public sector, in this case, example of how the parties working together can really deliver benefits. So in terms of an action plan, we all want to bridge that gap. We all want to keep emissions down to that 1.5 degree level. Measure your impact. Discover where you are today using that free carbon footprint tool. Use the other tool in order to make your next procurement more sustainable, and then look at ways to increase the length of time that you use those devices when you've purchased them, and use your existing devices to reduce waste, but also to reduce the manufacturing emissions, which are 75 to 80% of the emissions for a device's life. So use devices for longer in order to keep those emissions to a minimum. And with that, I'd like to hand you back to Roberto from Acer.
Thank you very much, Ewan. And for this very interesting presentation, I have shared the links in the chat as well, and anyone can use them, as Ewan said, to visit. Well, if you're from a school, and check what they're doing there. So, Roberto, now your turn.
Yes, thank you. Now, and also allow me how important are the tools that PX3 are delivering, because one of the challenges that we have seen is also how we can measure and compare results. So if we take, for instance, the product carbon footprint, for you as a school would be difficult, to take one report from one vendor, another from a different one, and make the comparison because there are different assumptions. And this is where the knowledge and the skills of PX3 is useful, because they are capable to harmonize the data and give you really neutral information. So the role more than ever of a company like PX3 is fundamentally to take the right decision. When it comes now, I also would like to give you more insight about what IT vendor are focusing on, which are the solution that the latest research and development were capable to offer to us as a vendor. The first important message I want to deliver is that every decision counts. So no matter what you're capable to do based on your efforts or on your budget or your capabilities, whatever you do, it's important to contribute to our mutual goal, that is to leave to our children a more sustainable environment. And this is also something that is driven within us as a company. There are, in my view, also echoing what Ian presented before, three major concepts to take into consideration when you are defining your green strategy. First of all, you need to set the strategy. Consultancy with PX3 can help, of course. It's important that you define which are your goals at short, medium, and long term. Whatever you decide to set as a goal, all the results need to be measurable, they need to be transparent, and it's important to show the progress, because especially nowadays it's very easy to fall into the greenwashing let's say danger. So it's important that you rely on independent bodies that can track, monitor, and share the results within your community. And the community is the third pillar, the engagement. We will see later with some practical example that all your strategy, all your initiatives can involve not only you as a teachers, but also your students, parents, and even the local community. So as a strategy, allow me just to say how we have, we as a vendor decided to approach this important quest. So we have structured our strategy, dividing and focusing on 6 main areas. Allow me to spend one word on the logistic, because of course, whenever there is, for instance, a new procurement, it's important that you plan the deliver properly. Because for instance, if there is a request to deliver the goods in less than 1 month, we as a vendor are forced to go with air freight cost. Air freight that of course is reducing the time to deliver the goods, but of course in terms of scope 3, so in terms of emission, is generating much more CO2 compared, for instance, to the sea shipment. So one message that as a vendor I would like to pass is it's important to plan also the procurement, giving us, let's say, to the vendor and to all the supply chain the time to properly deliver, for instance, the goods by sea. That is the one that is consuming the less amount of CO2. The other thing we have realized when we're defining our strategy is that as a vendor itself, we cannot sustain a really reliable and strong initiative and a strategy. Why? Let's have an example. This is, let's say, a pie chart that is representing the 4 phases of a life of a laptop. So the manufacturing, the transport, the use, and the end of life. Well, on average, the manufacturing process is taking 3/4 of the total CO2 emitted during the lifetime of a laptop. So of course, when we were defining our strategy, this is also something that you should consider when you are defining your strategy, is to involve and include, embrace all the stakeholders that are responsible of generating the highest value of CO2. So that's why, as part of our strategy, we ask to 80% at least of critical suppliers, so those that are actually building the single components of a device, to join 2 of the major independent organizations that are currently available in our industry. One is called RE100. The second one is called Science-Based Target Initiative. And so we have asked to 80% of our critical suppliers to join one of these 2 organizations by 2025. Otherwise, we won't be able, let's say, to make an effective strategy. However, of course, we need somehow to give the good example. So we have defined 3 major goals, again, in short, mid, and long term. First of all, we have seen before from Ion how is important that the products are offering energy efficiency performances. So that's why we decided to set the 35% less energy consumption. Carbon reduction. In this case, we are talking about scope 1 and scope 2. So if you remember at the beginning, we are talking about our direct emission from our offices and also the emission responsible from the electricity we are purchasing. In this case, the 50% reduction is set by 2030. And then joining the organization RE100, we have committed to have all the Acer, our offices in the world, to be 100% with renewable electricity. So in this case, of course, we can have a relevant impact on the scope 2 emission. So this is more or less in line with all the different IT vendors that are defining to do at group level. But at the end, what happens when you are receiving the product? So which are the latest innovation when it comes to green IT? There are, let's say, 4 major principles: materials, packaging, durability, and eco-labels. Allow me on the durability to spend a few words. We've seen before that it's important that we can deliver and produce products that are lasting longer. So the product that we are all offering for schools are different from the one that you can find, for instance, in the regular retail store, because they are tested to resist to the daily wear and tear. So this logo as military standard, it simply means that the product that you are receiving is resisting, for instance, to the worst weather condition, or also they can resist to falls from desk. Combined with a ruggedized design, combined with a long battery life, which is the benefit of a long battery life. If I have a product that can last up to 10, 11 hours, it means that I don't need a power charging during the daily lessons. So I don't need to keep the product constantly powered and plugged to the power supply. And I can simply, at the end of the day, put the laptop into, for instance, a charging cart that you can find in the market that are charging the devices in an intelligent way. And in this way, you are consuming less electricity. So you have a benefit even on your electricity bill. And then the reparability. So probably you're starting to hear modular design. Modular design means I can easily repair a single component, and I don't have to replace the full motherboard, for instance, to replace one USB port, just to give you an example. So this is the trend where, let's say, we are expecting the huge improvements in the coming years, because again, it's a save of money, save of cost, and save of time. All of this is offering an extended lifetime. And we know how it's important because, of course, it's more protecting your investment. And then the other important thing, again, independent evaluation. So in our industry, EPIAT and TCO are 2 independent companies that are validating the products, not only from sustainability perspective, but also from human rights and ethics perspective. So they are ensuring that the product is not following the eco requirements, but is also following the law of labor. So these 2 are the most popular in EMEA. They are pretty much equivalent, but it's another difference from, let's say, the regular product that you can find in the consumer market. Now, materials. We are driven by 3 major concepts. So reducing, reuse, and recycle as much as possible. At the moment, the technology is allowing us to use, especially for the plastic, that of course is the component that we all use the most, to have 2 different types of recycled plastic. One is called post-consumer recycle, and the second one is ocean-bound plastic. Both of them are eco-friendly. So of course, they are reducing the impact to the environment, not only because we are reusing recycled material, but also because the production process of this kind of plastic can save up to 25% of CO2 if we compare to the process we need to produce virgin plastic. And just to define which is the plastic that you are using every day. So the PCR plastic belongs to the category 7, that is including CDs and DVDs or baby bottles. So all, let's say, the hard plastic bottle that you're using normally. The ocean-bound plastic instead is using the PET, so the one that you find, for instance, in the regular water bottles. Where we are using this recycled plastic? Mainly in the chassis. It depends, let's say, on the components. So, for instance, the bottom cover, now the technology allows us to reach up to 60% of the total bottom cover made with PCR plastic, while on the chassis or on the screen bezel, we can reach 35%. We still have some components where we can reach 100%, for instance, on the surface of the touchpad. In this case, we are capable to use only plastic. OBP, again, is the plastic that we are collecting from the ocean. Of course, there are third-party organizations that are doing so, but it's probably the most interesting technology that has been introduced in our market lately. One question could be, why 60, 30? Why you cannot do a product fully made with the recycled plastic? At this stage, the technology doesn't allow to offer 100% PCR product, ensuring the same durability that we know is important in order to have extended lifetime. So we need to find a proper balance between using as much PCR plastic as possible, but at the same time ensuring that you still have a durable device. Maybe in 5 years we will make it, but at the moment we still have this sort of limit. Now let's try to quantify which is the amount of plastic we are talking about, because with the percentage is always a bit complicated. So these are numbers from, let's say, our most sustainable laptop, but just to give you an idea, we are capable to include more than 200 grams of PCR plastic in the overall plastic weight of the product, equals to 14 CDs or 3 baby bottle of 150 millimeters. This is something that we're able to achieve, let's say, on the latest and most advanced one, but typically an education laptops can stay of the range between 80 and 120 grams, depending on the screen size and on the total weight. So still we are talking about a real remarkable quantity. So this is something that you can really touch. You don't see it, but you can really touch the weight of the sustainable material we are using. The product then comes in a packaging. In the packaging, instead, we have reached an incredible level of sustainability. Because, for instance, now the technology allows us to remove completely the virgin plastic use. So we are using only paper or recycled paper, up to 90%, let's say on the brown box board that you normally find when you're opening up a product. Even the laptop bag, the white bag that you usually find before taking out your laptop, is fully made with the industrial recycled PET, so the standard regular bottles. We have removed the plastic even from the manual kit or even from the wrap around the power supply. Moreover, even the ink is different because we are capable to use water or soy-based ink. So if you find that on the box the ink that is not fully dark, it's because we are using eco-friendly inks, again, like water or soy-based. But actually, the more interesting innovation comes from the second life design. So all the latest packaging are 100% recyclable. So maybe you just throw it away properly, of course. But let's say there is a lot of creativity in this aspect because we are trying to find some way to actually reuse your packaging, transforming them, for instance, with a laptop stand or with a box to contain all your stuff. So this is something where I'm curious to see what we will be capable, all of us, to deliver in the future. This is all about the current technology. And just to name the most relevant one, and on purpose, I didn't touch the one on the energy efficiency because it's a topic that we've touched already. However, as said before, we need to measure. So what are the documents that the vendor can provide you to prove which are the improvements in terms of sustainability? Ian before talked a lot about the product carbon footprint. Just as a reminder, is simply providing the equivalent CO2 emitting during the whole life cycle of the products. Again, it's important to rely on tools that are capable to harmonize the data like the one delivered by Pix3. But there is another document that I encourage you to ask to vendors, and it's called Eco Declaration. The Eco Declaration is an international format, an international template, equal for everyone. And in just one single document, you can find information related to the presence of hazardous substances, the eco-design conformity with the EU regulation that is respecting, like ROHS, the energy consumption. So probably you already know the Energy Star certification or validation. Well, within the Eco Declaration, you find the values you need coming from the Energy Star release. And then information on the product materials, both on the laptop and on the packaging. So for instance, the 222 grams that we showed before can be easily found within this document. So there is a section that all vendors need to fill in, showing the percentage and the weight. So this is a document that can really sum up all the most important and most relevant information related to sustainability for the product. So it's something that I encourage you to ask us when you are deciding to go for a new purchase. And then the engagement. I decided to give you 3 different initiatives that we have seen most popular at the moment. The first one is the tree planting. In this case, there are 2 different approaches. On one side, that is probably even the most engaging one, is to create some events on field. So in your city, with your community. And there are a lot of no-profit organization. I'm just naming here Life Terra, that by the way is also a good friend of European SchoolNet, that can help you to arrange and create some events involving your students and your parents in your country and in your city. The idea is, for instance, to clean up the environment and then to do some initiative to do some planting of trees in your community. Otherwise, there are other organizations like the one we have collaborated recently called Freedom that can help you to create a forest remotely. So in our case, for instance, we were planting trees on behalf of our school, but you can do the same. You can create a community with your partners and create a forest and name after your school. In this case, the trees are planted normally in Africa and Latin America, but still you can also monitor and measure the impact of your initiative. And this is one. The second one is the end of life. So we have talked a lot about the life duration of a laptop. What should we do when the laptop is not fitting anymore with your purpose in your school? One aspect is to give them a second life. If the product doesn't fit anymore with your school, doesn't mean it cannot fit for other schools. So in this case, for instance, a school in Portugal decided to donate 4 laptops that they were not using anymore to a school in Cape Verde, so in Africa. And it was a wonderful initiative. And instead of having a product taking dust in some basement, they actually give a second life. So don't underestimate the value of donate your old technology or to reuse them, for instance, for libraries or for our open spaces. But you may reach the level where the device is not usable anymore. So in this course, of course, it's important to recycle and to recycle properly. As you know, it has to be done in a proper way. So something that, for instance, we have decided to focus on is to offer a recycle for free to schools. But if not with us, there are in every country, there are some independent organizations that are helping you even to take care about the bureaucracy, because it's not just about, throw them away. There is some bureaucracy behind, and this organization can help you to recycle properly the IT devices you have and that are not usable anymore. And the last point I want to tackle is to offer you a creative way of using the sustainable data. This is actually an idea that I've stolen from a teacher in Spain. He was looking for a creative way to make students more responsible about the technology they're using, especially the younger one. So this school has in place a one-to-one project. They're giving every year a new device to the new students. And for them, it's complicated to learn them, hey, this is a device, it's a property, take care of it. And so they had a lot of broken displays. They try to say, the display is expensive, but of course, the value of money for younger students is not so relevant. So we decided to change from money value to green value. So how we did that? We took the carbon footprint of a laptop that is usually used by primary students. We calculated which is the percentage of the CO2 that is where the display production is responsible. And just for you to know, the display is the component in general that is consuming the highest quantity of CO2. So in this example, around 100 kilos of CO2 were the quantity needed to create a new display. But even here, 100 kilos doesn't mean a lot. 100 kilos means the CO2 absorbed by 4 trees in 1 year of life. So the idea of this teacher is, I won't tell them that the display can cost 100 euros, 200 euros. I will tell them that the display can cost 4 trees life for 1 year. And we all know that Z generation and millennials, they do care about sustainability way more than money and health. So I guess that this is just one example on how introducing green IT or introducing the sustainability in your school can actually have some benefit from a teacher and learning perspective. Now, to sum up, allow me just to remind and to echo which are in our view, the recommendation for you as a school that are willing to implement a digital IT strategy. First of all, set your strategy and goals of course, with the support of the consultancy. Measure your progress. This is very, very, very important. And then, even more important, involve your community. You cannot do alone. We don't have to do it alone. And it's important that, let's say, all of us can contribute, even with just one single small action. So with that, I really thank you for attending this webinar. And of course, we are open to any question, while I remind you that at the end, you will receive also the link to stay in contact with myself, with you, and with our organization, and on the right side, with a lot of useful link of global organizations that are monitoring, for instance, the CO2 emission rather than the energy consumption, the PET and the TCO link where you can find the list of products fitting with those, and the link of the two independent no-profit organization that can help you, for instance, to engage with your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for this very, very interesting presentation and for sharing also all the possibilities that schools can consider when purchasing equipment, but also when they are kind of trying to develop their digital education strategy, which is something that is happening a lot nowadays in Europe with the recovery and resilience funds of the European Commission. So We also asked some questions while you were both talking in the chat, and one of the things that we asked is how often do schools change or teachers change their equipment in the schools, and some of them mentioned that actually they don't change it that often, and we know
Okay.
that also that schools often lack resources. So some of them mentioned that they change every 10 years their devices.
Okay.
So a question would be, based on the principles for durability that you mentioned there, when it comes to device renewal, how do you think, or how does your company, basically, how does Acer support these kind of schools, and whether the devices that you develop specifically for education, or devices in general specifically made for education, can last for so long, or what are some kind of practices that teachers can keep in mind, having in mind that they lack the resources to change it every 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, it's also important to underline one part, because the length of on how much I can use the device is also strictly linked to the type of operating system I'm using. And the reason why I'm telling so is because one important thing, I need to ensure that my laptop can get all the time the latest security update and features update. Now, for instance, Google is offering up to 8 years of support for the latest devices. Windows, as guess, we are in the range. So probably 8 years is the, let's say, the maximum that we recommend, at least to consider as a length for the devices. Another idea that could be, I didn't touch this today, but it's another trend that we started to see that is fostering the circular economy, is the so-called device as a service. So of course it changed the way in which in a way I'm planning my procurement, because usually is I'm receiving the money now from the government or whatsoever, I need to purchase the device right now. Well, one way to ensure a long life of devices could be to consider the device as a service, because in this way, of course, I'm paying year after year, but at least I'm ensuring my organization that I'll always have the latest, let's say, products in my hand. This could be also another important recommendation I will give to schools. So to consider the device as a service for their upcoming procurement. I know there are some challenges behind, because of course it means that I'm paid every year, but it's a trend that probably we need all of us, let's say, to foster and contribute to.
Yeah, and I guess also the right to a repair that we see increasing in Europe,
Yes.
and you touched upon that as well.
Yes. Reparability, we have seen in the US, it's a different market, because in the US they have very large district, they have their own IT made even by students. So the latest trend is, I want to repair the device on my facility, in my building, So there are this sort of program that are happening already in the US. We haven't reached that level here yet, but probably this could be another trend. So training our student and teacher to repair the products, offering them maybe a second life, of course. This, of course, requires from our side as a vendor more investment on the modular design. That, of course, can support this technology. But indeed, this is another trend that in the next 5-10 years, we expected to see widely spread across our region.
Interesting. Yun, you would like also to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it really also depends what you're using the device for. So it depends what you're installing onto it and running locally on it versus what you're using from a cloud service. So I think if you're accessing cloud software as a service based applications, or services that are predominantly delivered from the cloud to the classroom, then the device is just acting as a gateway. And under those circumstances, as Roberto mentioned, you can use lighter operating systems, you can use less complicated devices, and those devices will last longer. If you need software that has to be installed and run locally, for a specialist lesson, then that device is likely to need to be refreshed more often because it's doing far more, and there are dependencies between the operating system and the software that you're using. But that sort of utility model where you're using it as a gateway to cloud services, we see is definitely something that's going to increase. So we've done a lot of work with Microsoft recently on their new Windows 365, Windows as a service model via Azure. And again, that's really, again, driving this trend towards, lower specification, but more reliable, longer lived devices. And that's one of the key benefits of cloud services.
Yeah. And I guess that has to do also with, as you all mentioned, deciding well in advance what the device is used for by the schools and the purposes before buying the devices.
Yes. Let's say I could say maybe against my interest, but I prefer that the school it is buying less but better. So instead of focusing on the quantity, so like, okay, I need to give a device to every student. I don't care about the specs. This is my budget. I want to give one device per student. It's important to raise the question, what do I need for my students? And then I can implement stage after stage. Because we've seen many times in the past, especially during the pandemic, that there was this urge of providing devices. And at the end, if you're selecting the wrong devices, then at the end, you don't use the devices anymore after a short period of time. And so you are somehow slowing down your digital transformation within your school. So that would be my recommendation.
Great. And another topic that was mentioned is the type of devices used in schools are mostly PCs, laptops, and tablets, of course, because as you mentioned, this is the gateway for something else. So I wanted to ask you, in your service, when a school comes on your platform and tries to see what is most sustainable, perhaps solution for their needs, is there a way for them to see the whole range of devices? How does a school kind of assess the different options that exist? Because, for example, Acer has a range of products that have different sustainability kind of specs. But then how does it goes across the product line, but also across the companies on your platform? Could you give an example or like a short explanation of how that works?
So from our perspective,
yes, on your platform.
Okay,
exactly.
just checking. Sorry. So from ours, I mean, literally, you can say that what you want is a tablet device or a laptop or a desktop or a monitor, and say the number of years that you're going to use that and where you're going to use it. And I think, as Roberto mentioned earlier on, what we've done is normalize that data so it produces a level playing field, so you can compare a device from Microsoft with a device from Acer with a device from HP or Lenovo, and see what the genuine scope 2 and scope 3 emissions for the way that you would use that device, rather than the assumptions that would be made by the manufacturer. It will include information about the specification of the device, the screen size and things like that. But ultimately, you're then looking at that to see which ones meet my criteria, and then adding those to a short list, and as I said, a 6-device comparison. So that's available, and as I say, that's free of charge for any school to use. So I would just urge that comparison is well worth doing.
And it's great also that companies like Acer is doing this and is providing this information, because it's very important for the schools to be able to do this kind of assessment.
Yeah. And again, we have seen in the last 12, 15 months, a massive request from all the different markets. So education is one of those, but indeed, we also, as a regular person, we will see even in the retail store that there is a big focus on sustainability, delivering the right messaging, and ensuring that all the different companies are doing something for the environment. But I mean, we can also experience them doing some shop in the markets. It's full of this kind of information. So our purpose for today was really to give you some guidance, because sorry, but scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, CO2, PCF will be part of your daily task and daily knowledge, because we need to absorb and to understand this value from now on.
Indeed, and to avoid also, as you mentioned, the greenwashing that often
Exactly.
happens.
100%.
We need to be ready to read the data. So that is where we all need to study, to back to school and to study. Yes.
Indeed. So I think we reached our end of the webinar today. I don't know if you want to have a word, kind of a last say before we close, Roberto.
Yeah, from my side, I want to, let's say, echoes again, every decision count. So there is a great opportunity, the technology, there are a lot of agency, consultant company outside, maybe even nearby, even very close to your school, that can help you. And don't underestimate the value that our students, so the new generation, are giving to the environment. I was having this morning another call, and they were telling that 44% of students in Europe are taking care of environment. So it's the value with the highest percentage, more than health and money. So it's also something where it would be easy to get the involvement of your students to take some action, even the smallest one.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to echo that, get informed, make better informed decisions, but also show that you're using science as a way of driving sustainability for your organizations and for your students. And that's really important for them to see that, those metrics, that science-based decision making is something that you do as an organization, and that you care enough in order to make that as much a part of your decision making as money.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much both, and thank you all for joining us today in this webinar, and we hope you had the chance to learn more about the possibilities that exist to integrate green IT in your school, and just to initiate the discussion around sustainability in all aspects of a school life, basically. The webinar recording will be posted shortly on our YouTube channel, so feel free to revisit it if you want and share it with others that did not have the chance to make it today. And make sure to follow us on social media, and we will share also the presentations of the two speakers together with all the links for information on our FCL website under the webinars page. Thank you all, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.